Alright guys, we are installing coilovers on the Corvette again. I'll explain why in just a second. Basically we're taking the BR series off and we're putting DR series on. BR series is a linear damper, DR series is a digressive damper, which I'll explain what that means in a minute. But first, let's show you guys the old suspension and get it off. So there's the old rears, nothing special. Here's the old fronts. So as you see, these are standard springs at the top, and since the springs at the top, there's not a lot of room around the control arm, so we have to run our smaller diameter shock body, smaller diameter spring. For the new stuff, we're going to invert it. It's inverted, so the shock body will be up here in the control arm area, and the spring will be in the bottom, so we can run our full-size shock, full-size spring, which we only make our DR series in 53 mil, so we had to do that to run the DR. So I'll get these off and then compare the two. All right, so let's go ahead and take these off. There we go. Go ahead and pull this out. Alright, so here we have the old BRs next to the new DRs. So these are the fronts. As you can see, this front has now been inverted. Lower mount is now on the top. Top mount is now on the bottom with a spherical joint. This is obviously going to be the new top, but spherical joint, because when it's in there it sits at an angle, and when it compresses it does change angle a little bit, so the spherical joint will allow it to do so. As you can see, the shock diameter is much larger between the two. The spring diameter is much larger between the two. This is our standard size, so this will give us a lot more options for shocks and springs, so we can change rate, valving, shock length, things like that much more easily than this setup. The rear is basically identical, other than being a 53 mil shock and a 62 mil spring instead of a 44 mil shock, 50 mil spring. The top plate is slightly raised, which should give us a little bit more drop, about 10 mil more drop. So I'm hoping that clears up the wheel gap issue that I'm having right now. I don't really want to go much shorter on the shock. A lot of you were saying that I could go lower because, you know, the car's still high and it still be functional, but the problem is going lower means sacrificing shock stroke, which means I'll probably be hitting the bump stops, which means terrible performance, and I don't want that. So yeah, that is the comparison between the two. Before we install them though, I want to give you guys like a little damper tech, like 30-second explanation of what the difference between a linear and a digressive shock is. Oh. Alright, so this is a very simple graph, purely just to explain what it looks like. So a linear shock will look something like this. As speed increases, this is inches a second. Now this is how fast the shock is moving up or down in inches a second, not how fast the car is moving forward. So it's velocity of the shock up or down. So as the speed increases here, the force is increased within the shock. Same on the rebound side. This is compression, this is rebound. That's what a linear shock looks like. The faster the shock is moving up and down, the more force is applied. So let's look at a digressive shock graph. Alright, so now we have our digressive plot. The digressive is going to be in green here. So as you can see, I mean, this is very exaggerated, but it ramps up quickly and then tapers off in force. Same on the rebound side. So that means in your low speed area, which is about 1, 2, 3 inches a second. 3 is actually really on the high end, but around 1 to 2. This is going to be braking, turn-in, acceleration, all of that, like all of the driver input you feel, like everything you feel as you're doing things to the car. That's going to be all right about here, which is where it's going to be initially pretty stiff. And then as you get up into the 4+ range, this is all going to be high speed. So this is going to be like hitting a bump, curbing, and any sort of change in the road. So as you can see, it tapers off tremendously so that you get all the nice tight feel in the low speed section, all the driver feedback, but then it tapers off and it's soft over bumps. So it'll be tight as you're braking into a turn, but if you hit a rumble strip, it'll be soft. Same with driving on the street. It'll be soft and smooth over bumps, but as you're braking, turning in, sliding sideways, whatever, all the low speed inputs, it'll be stiff. So it's really a nice like in between of everything, really. Alright, so now I've given you guys a basic understanding of the difference between a digressive and a linear shock. We're going to go ahead and install these and see how they ride. They should ride a lot better. It should be really nice. I'm really excited. I've been waiting to put these in for months. Or weeks, I don't know, a long time. So we're just going to get to that. Alright, we're going to go ahead and get the fronts in. Alright, got the front one installed. Fits perfect. There's actually more clearance around this arm with it being the shock here instead of the spring, because the spring is now below the control arm. Getting there. And now the rears. And rear end. No clearance issues whatsoever. Everything looks good. So now we're going to put the wheels on and put it on the ground. Alright, so the extended top hat's in the rear, got it exactly where I want it. That's probably going to settle to like right at the tire. And I've still got the same stroke as before, and it didn't ever bottom out before. The front, we went a little longer on the shock just to get a little more stroke. I'm thinking that's going to be too high, so we might have to change that front shock spec out. One of the big things with developing these kits that I think a lot of people don't really understand is that, yeah, we can maybe make a shorter shock, but if we make a much shorter shock, then you have less shock stroke, so then the car could just be bottoming out all the time if the shock's not long enough. And on this particular car, everything's really short from the factory, so to make it shorter to actually get a ride height drop is kind of difficult at times. So I'm gonna drive this around, feel it out, see how much it settles, and then we'll see what we can do about maybe changing the front shock setup just a little bit. But the rear is perfect, so we're gonna go drive around and see what it's like.
You wanna do something funny, Al? Dance.
Alright, so I think this is going to be the final ride height for me. We're right just on the tire in the rear, which this is going to settle a little more, but it's pretty much exactly where I'd want it to be. In the front we've got, here, let's go on this side. In the front we've got a little bit of wheel gap, but even under a hard corner it rubbed a little bit, and at angle I'm not going to want to bash this fender up, so I do need that little bit of wheel gap to keep it functional. Maybe I'll lower it a little more in the future, but for now I'm pretty happy with it. This is what it looks like overall. I think it looks sweet. This is by far the best angle. Also the DRs rode just as expected, nice and stiff. It's slow shock velocity circumstances, so all the turn in, braking, acceleration, all of that. So the car feels like really stiff, and then as soon as you hit a bump, it feels like almost stock suspension. So it's exactly what I wanted. DRs for me are pretty ideal in most circumstances. There are cases where a linear shock would outperform a digressive shock, but that's also subjective. So yeah, that pretty much wraps it up for the install today. I didn't go into super depth on the install because you guys have already seen this install before. If you haven't, we do have another video of that, which I'll link below. If you're looking to get a set of these DR coilovers, we just have to finalize a couple things. We're going to do a tiny bit more testing on the front shock, just to make sure that it can get to the right height range that everyone might want it to, and then we'll be able to finalize them. But the link to the BRs will be below. We also are going to change the BR to be the same spec as this. The only difference between the BR and the DR will then just be the shock internally. It'll still be inverted and everything like this, so that if somebody buys a BR kit and wants to upgrade to a DR down the road, they can buy just shock cartridges. They don't have to buy a whole new kit. So we'll be changing that kit as well. There's nothing wrong with the old kit if you have that, but we're just going to make it more compatible with the DR and stuff for people who want to upgrade. So with that, thank you guys for watching. Thanks for subscribing. I'll see you next time. Oh, there's fan in my eye.